got a lovely speaker here with us today, Claire, who I actually found out through a friend of mine who lives near her area. So, and I contacted Claire, and she sent me a copy of her book, which I've 10 pages to go. It's a very good book, very interesting. And so I decided to invite her here today and share her story with you because it's very interesting and unusual. Yeah. So, just to introduce you to Claire, Claire's a writer, obviously. She's written a book. I'm sure you've written other things. A spiritual healer, metaphysical counsellor and group facilitator, and mentor and seeker of divine wisdom. We all want that, don't we?
What is this? Hopeful. Yeah, we'll get it.
It's on the bucket list.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So, would you please welcome Claire Swinney today?
Oh, thank you. Oh, I get claps and everything. That's so nice. Thank you all for coming. And for those that might have gotten lost, that persisted in finding their way here. I have worked in the industry of, spiritual healing and metaphysical counselling, and I've been a psychic advisor, a workshop facilitator, and now I've written my first book, and I am in the process of writing a second book as well. And I've been doing this for about 27 years, in fact. Writing is much more of a recent kind of addition, to my my skill set, I suppose you might call it. And during the history of my work, I haven't actually worked with heaps and heaps of people that have been dying and have passed in the afterlife, although I have certainly worked with a number of people that have had disease, and I've worked with them to help them to prepare for their death process. And on occasion, I've continued my relationship with them because they've required further communication with me, either through needing some support in the afterlife or through passing on messages to their loved ones, things that perhaps they were not able to say to them, at the time of their death, particularly for those that have experienced very sudden death. There's always something that perhaps has never been said, even if it's "I love you" or "I'm sorry" or "I hope you can forgive me," or whatever the messages are. So I have been involved in that as part, of a component of my work. Mostly I work with people that are working through their emotional kind of agenda and finding their way back to spirit or God or the divine, and so that they can live a life that is more from their heart rather than from a fear-based kind of mind-controlling sort of reality. I don't want to still sound out there, but I'm also very good at giving practical advice as well, and trying to blend the spiritual with the human experience in the best ways that I can mentor people in being able to do that. I also my work now has changed quite a bit. I'm obviously promoting my book. That's one element, but I'm also more sort of doing groups that really help people to connect to angelic consciousness and try to elevate their own level of awareness, to live as angels do, which is with kindness, integrity, the care for our fellow human beings, and to be the best that we can possibly be in this particular lifetime. There's several reasons I do that. I love it. That's the main reason. I love chatting to the angels, and I love getting their information and listening to their guidance and being able to offer that as a channel for spirit, to be able to offer that to other people. But also with that, there's a lot of sort of mentoring going on, because lots of people want to live so differently now, and I think they really, really, really want to live more of their higher purpose, whatever that is for you, or for those people I work with. And that can be simply by practicing acts of kindness. It can be to follow sort of philanthropic pursuits or anything, and it doesn't have to be larger than life to be of being our best selves or working from our higher selves. It can be really, really simple, and it can be very humble, and that's what I love about it. I think the angels want to guide each of us, not just the people that are going to be larger in life, just all of us that need support, need help, and to be shown ways to be our best selves and to be given guidance in what perhaps we need to let go of, you know, to be our best selves, because we do hold on to stuff and we do get angry and we do become unforgiving and resentful and bitter and a bit twisted and all of those sorts of things, and that's sometimes the way of the human experience. But I think probably each of us in the room now, and those people that I've engaged with over the years and will continue to work with, they really just want to let a lot of that sort of stuff go, and they want to find a whole nother way to be here, which isn't about competition and struggle and survival and feeling threatened and perhaps, you know, not being able to control some of those darker feelings and thoughts, and not kind of make enemies, if you like, befriend humanity. So that's kind of where my work is. So more recently, last September, I self-published this book. And this is not a hard sell. It is available for sale for $16, and if you'd like to purchase it, you can buy it off me in the break, but no pressure. It's entirely your choice. If you choose not to buy it now, it's for sale on all major online bookstores as a print on demand or as an e-book if you prefer to read, you know, your books on an e-reader or what have you. So this is, as I mentioned to one of the ladies here already, this is actually the story about my husband. And it is the story from when he was first diagnosed with cancer and the journey that we took together as a married couple until his death. And then he also then provides me with information about his experiences in the afterlife. So in some ways it's a little unusual, but there are other books out there about afterlife and, you know, channels having transmissions from people they know or from other beings about the experience in the afterlife. But I guess this particular book is much more personal to me. Now the interesting thing was, is that as we were approaching my husband's death, I naturally actually thought a couple things. That as a psychic, I'd be able to communicate with him all the time. Like, you know, we'd just be chatting away, and even though I knew I'd be grief-stricken because, you know, I'd lost his physical presence in my life, I thought, great, we'll be talking. We can talk about all the stuff you talk about, and he could give me advice and all that kind of stuff. Well, that kind of didn't actually happen. So after his funeral, he kind of like zoomed off, and I was not able to contact him at all. At some level, my logical mind, you know, knowing kind of the experiences that others have had in the afterlife, he was obviously needing to do his own thing, you know, whether it was more healing or transitioning or whatever the experiences were. So I logically knew that that was obviously the case, but naturally I felt completely bereft and obviously completely abandoned, that somehow there was still no real presence of him. But 2 years after he died, he then returned to me in, you know, an energy form, of course, and basically gave me all the information, not all of it all at once, but gave me some of the insights about what he'd been doing and, you know, what he'd been experiencing during that time. Initially, I had all sorts of emotional reactions to that. As you can well imagine, it had only been 2 years since he'd passed. We'd been together for 32 years, you know, so a really, really long time. I don't know that that matters any. I think if you've only been together for 2 years at all, you're still grief-stricken, you know, if you love someone. But during that time, I obviously had an incredible sort of amount of emotional reactions. I felt really angry and pretty kind of like, well, you know, it's okay now, coming back, da-da-da, you know, normal stuff. Fortunately, in his state, he wasn't reactive to that, you know, because there's nothing in that to react to. I mean, he's not emotional in that way anymore. And then after that, I must say it was probably one of the most psychically phenomenal experiences I've had with, you know, a spirit, I suppose, in that it was sort of like so almost physical, if you like. It was actually felt that he'd was physical again, because I could still feel his touch, you know, and I felt completely hugged and embraced by him. And also, even though all our communications were telepathic, it was like he was speaking to me very, very clearly. So at the end of this, it was a 3-day period that we sort of hung out on and off. And, you know, I cried, and I went through my anger and my hurt and my feeling abandonment and my questioning why. I also at that time had to process a hell of a lot of grief and guilt. And the guilt actually pertained to the fact that being a spiritual healer, and being a spiritual healer for a long period of time, I realised I'd felt incredibly guilty because I couldn't actually heal him, and I couldn't actually save his life. And that was naturally devastating at the time of his death, but I more realised how devastating it was to me once he'd returned in that way. Now, logically, once again, we all know, I mean, none of us can control when anybody's going to die, as much as we'd like to. And for those of you who've experienced people that you love or that you're close to that have died, you know, you have to be able to let them go. But it's not easy, is it? It's really, really hard, and we want to be able to control that. We want to be able to stop it. And naturally, being a healer, I honestly thought I would have been able to cure him. But I wasn't the answer. You know, the answer for him was that he needed to go on his own pathway, and his life needed to end when it did, and he needed to journey where he needed to journey after that. Now, it's taken me a while to be able to say all that, of course, without feeling teary-eyed and sad. And that is one of the things that happened during the course of his illness, even though I didn't kind of fully realise all the consequences of that at the time. He did say, you know, I need you to give me permission to die. And, you know, when someone asks you something and you love them, well, you're going to say yes, of course. You need to do whatever you need to do because you want that freedom for them. And he particularly said, I feel my time is up, and I feel I can't try to keep myself alive any longer. I need to let go, and I feel I'm being called home, you know, to my spiritual home, you know, to undertake the other things that are a part of my destiny, my journey. So naturally, I said yes. But even if I'd said no, I mean, I would have looked like a real meanie pants, wouldn't I? But it wouldn't have done anything anyway. It just would have made him feel probably guilty, I suppose, you know. So with my permission giving, I do think that supported him in being able to surrender ultimately to the disease and then to his death. And it is quite interesting because as soon as he surrendered to the fact that yes, he couldn't do anything more about it, he'd also surrendered his, I don't really think he had the fear of dying. He was never that. I'd much more been afraid of dying than he ever was. And so I don't think he really surrendered the fear of dying. I think it was more the fear of trying to have to overcome the obstacles of trying to stay alive any longer somehow. So once that was transcended, and even though his body was already in an incredible amount of pain because he had mesothelioma, which is an asbestos-related cancer, I mean, I believe it's very painful. He transcended so much and allowed so much love from, you know, spirit and spiritual beings that were supporting him that he actually virtually took such minimal drugs at all through the stages, you know, of his dying process. And I think through that transcendence of any fear, I feel that his experience of pain completely altered. I'm certainly not saying I could do it in that way, but when we were around him, we could actually feel he'd already started that process of being embraced by spirit. And through that receiving, that constant receiving of spiritual energy and spiritual healing, it supported him maintaining, I guess, his integrity and holding his presence to his own death, because dying a conscious death was very important to him. And I think in that transcendence of fear, so was the pain, the physical pain. And through not being drugged out, he didn't take morphine, any of those sorts of drugs, he could remain very present to everybody. And he also was able to be present, I guess, to spirit as they were preparing to take, you know, to take him out of his body and, you know, to his other experiences in the afterlife. So that was very admirable in itself, I think, and being around that energy the whole time, it was, you know, quite phenomenal, because it was like, I don't know, you're just constantly on this natural high, if you like, because you were being uplifted. It was only sort of if I drove to the shop that I'd think, oh God, my husband could die. I'd rush back, maybe he'll die when I'm away, so I better get home really quickly. That wasn't going to happen. He was never going to die alone. I mean, I always knew I would be with him when he died, but when I'm just trying to point out that I was in that space, everything was actually okay. I knew everything was going to be okay. It was more when I was out of that lovely kind of, you know, space, I suppose, which was like a higher vibrational kind of space. That's when the fear erupted personally in me. Yes?
Everyone can hear Claire?
Sorry, I meant to ask that. Thanks, Cheryl. On that note,
I think this lady said not very well. No, this lady can't hear you very well.
sure. Sorry.
There's a bit of lag, that's all. When you turn it on.
Do you want to come closer? Would you like to come closer as well? That might be nice, and then I can see your beautiful face. Can't handle all the businesses. Maybe I'll do, yeah, I'll put the book down. We'll just wait till this gentleman comes and settles in. Is it on now? Is that on?
Probably a button, the switch on the side maybe.
No, it says it's on. Maybe I just need to talk into it. Is that better? Hello?
I can't hear any difference.
Pause.
See, that's a great thing about these small meetings, that you can stop and adjust things as you need to, which is great.
Okay, just do a test.
Test, test, test. Is that better?
A bit more.
Test, test, test. Is that better? No, no. Can we move her around a little bit?
Try that.
I could come closer to you. How's that? Is that better?
Give me a go.
Good.
Testing 1, 2.
Everyone says Everyone says I
talk
normally
into
speak
it that way,
really
rather than over
loud.
it.
Oh yeah, really
Yeah.
loudly. Now I'm going to go back to get my book.
I can't change the air conditioning, unfortunately. Yeah, sorry.
I have a shawl. Do you want to borrow it? Oh, but this might help. That shawl comes from Durham. Sala. Anyway, thought you'd like to know that in India, where the Dalai Lama lives, in fact. Okay, is that better now? You okay? Great. All right. Now, on that note, does anyone have any questions to ask me so far? A million? Just take a moment. If you do have a question, please ask it.
So with your husband,
Yes.
how was his consciousness around this at the time? Was he fully aware that he was making the preparation to go? Was he able to share with you or explain to you how that actually felt?
Yeah. Look, throughout his life, I mean, he would have considered himself a very spiritual person, but he also was a person that lost faith a lot of times during the course of his life. And questioned constantly, you know, why he was here, what he was doing here. And but as he started to accept that he was going to die, it was sort of like being in personal development 1000, you know, everything was accelerated. And, you know, as soon as he thought something or felt something, you know, he almost had major realizations with all of those things, and then suddenly was able to sort of let go, you know, and that was all a part of the preparation for death, because we're letting go of the things that bind us to life, you know, and if we're doing it with consciousness and awareness, then we'll be actually conscious about what it is, you know. So he had some very, very powerful kind of I don't know, spiritual experiences. He had very powerful insight, you know, which wasn't prompted by me, that he came to himself. And he also had great transformation when his mother, who had died a number of years before him, came to visit. That was also very powerful and healing. I mean, this is all in the book, but the other thing that he had a great experience for, because he was very, very connected to nature during his life, particularly the ocean, and he was often his best self when he was in nature or when he was windsurfing and so on. And I think his connection with nature was something he didn't always talk about, because it's something he felt, and it was something very innate within him. And also it's like Mother Nature was also very present during this process of his dying, and he felt an amazing kind of honouring of her for the life that she had provided for him, and also in how he allowed himself to surrender his body unto the earth again. And that was deeply moving, witnessing these things. I didn't come up with these ideas. This is things that it was initiated within his own heart and his own kind of psychicness, I suppose. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, thank you. And what about physically? Was he, when it got closer to when he was going to make his actual physical crossing, was he aware in his own self that the time was getting very close?
Oh, he knew instinctually the day that he was going to die. Several things happened to the lead up of that particular day. We knew that mesothelioma affects the linings of things, so it was already in the lining of his lungs and all his diaphragm, but it was also in the lining around his heart, so that we knew his heart was shutting down basically, and would cease to be able to function. And he also had a massive tumour there, and so on and so forth. So he kind of knew about 3 days before. He sort of said it's probably going to be in the next 2 or 3 days. You know, so he had full awareness of that. And then on the day that he died, he was very, very particular about, even though he couldn't walk, he couldn't breathe, he was on oxygen and so on, somehow through, you know, divine faith or divine support, we managed to get him in the bath, because he wanted a bath. He was a very particular man. He talks about his vanity in the book. And he wanted to have a bath, he wanted to be clean shaven, he wanted his fingernails cut, his toenails cut, you know, all of those sorts of things. But this is the part of, I think, him being clean in death. It was very, very important that he was clean in death. I mean, once he died, we also still sponged him down and things like that, because that was very much a part of, I don't know, cleanliness is close to godliness, you know. And really, he did predict the right day. And that day was a rather unusual day, because even though, as I said, he wasn't on drugs or anything, he was very much out of his body. And it was harder to keep pulling him back, you know, to be present. And then it just came closer to the time, and basically, honestly, we put him to bed, and he just said, oh, you know, basically, I know it's going to happen like soon. So I laid on the bed with him, and really, we cuddled up, you know, we had a kiss, and I just put my hand on his heart, and then the breaths just slowed down, and he took the normal last sort of gasp, and then the heart just stopped beating. So
it was very peaceful.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And I mean, it was incredibly sad, as you can well imagine, but it was, he'd created a place of such extreme beauty, and you could just feel the presence of what we all hope for, that divine within us all the time, and so on, but it was definitely there and present. And one of the other significant things was that the animals, you know, we had 2 dogs and a cat, and they were amazing during the whole process of his illness. And at his death, you know, his favourite dog, you know, or she thought he was her boyfriend, she clambered and wanted to be up on the bed, so she lay on the other side with him. And then my other dog and my cat, they just started to cry. And initially it was a little unnerving, as you could well imagine, but actually I could just feel they were almost making like this sound, you know, bridge, if you like, as a way of support. And I think in other cultures there's a lot of sound that's made when their beloveds die, you know, as a support, you know, for the soul to begin its journey onward. So the dog and the cat eventually stopped crying, but the other dog remained on the bed with him, and she stayed there throughout the whole night and didn't move at all. And obviously I went in and out, and you know, I had to do other things, but yeah. So yeah, that was the experience. So it was a beautiful, beautiful conscious death, and you know, I tried as best as I can to remain conscious within that experience. I can't say I got it right all the time, you know, because we get clumsy as well. Well, hopefully, yeah. But we get clumsy, don't we? You know, and sometimes, yeah. But I can't give myself a hard time. I did the best I could, considering I'm only human. Okay, does that help your question? Great. Any other one? Anyone else? Yes.
Yes, it's maybe a strange question. Do you have a picture of him? You can see.
Do you know what? Oh, I do on my phone, but I just gave it to my daughter. I was going to bring a picture along. He was awfully handsome. He was so hot. Anyway, that's enough. I didn't actually, because I didn't. Because, yeah, for whatever reason, I didn't do it. But I was nearly going to bring a picture of us on our wedding day. Yeah, but thank you for asking. Maybe I will on my next talk. Yeah. Anyway, it's very handsome. And it was love at first sight. Okay, any other questions? Alrighty. All right, so I was now going to read an excerpt from the book. How does everyone feel about that? Is that okay? But how will I manage that with this? So this, I mean, there's quite a bit in the book, and I've obviously started kind of really quite part the way through. And so this is an excerpt called Twilight, A Place to Rest. So this is his perspective on one of the kind of energy spaces that you go into in the afterlife. And remember, this is his perspective. You might have your own perspective on it, or you might have read other perspectives on it, but you take it for what it is, okay? And as I said, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. It's just his version of the reality, okay? So, when I died, although I felt well prepared for the experience, I also needed time to find my rhythm and adjust to my new environment. Initially, it felt like I was on a roller coaster ride. It helped a lot to just surrender into those new and unusual sensations. Within a short time, I felt the innate joy of knowing my soul was part of something much greater than myself. It once again reaffirmed the potential for oneness with the divine. I also remember feeling sad that I had forgotten how to connect with that joy when I was in physical life. So Twilight, A Place to Rest. Once your feelings have settled and you have made further adjustments about your recent death, you will be directed towards a multifaceted energy system which I call Twilight. Your spiritual guardians and gatekeepers will assist you as you ease your way into this realm of consciousness. Your spiritual parents. Energetically, as you are now merged with the spirit bodies of your guides, they will help you to adjust to each new environment you visit when in transition. During each stage, their loving energies will sustain and nourish you and help you to feel calm amidst the temptation to be afraid. They will also help ease any feelings of uncertainty or confusion. They will encourage you to have periods of rest and stillness and to take a soul sleep when necessary. Surprisingly, those processes can be somewhat exhausting. They also help to settle your radiant heart by supporting it until you find the perfect rhythm for surrender and acceptance. Your gatekeepers guard the gates for you between Earth, I can't turn and talk, Earth and the other spiritual planes They can be seen as mystical figures just beyond the veils, and some may refer to them as the angels of death. I know them, however, as a particular vibration of consciousness known as heart angels. Heart angels hand you over to Mother Earth for each of your physical lives and also guide you home after death. Together with your spiritual parents, they help transport you through each realm as you transition the afterlife. They also help your spiritual processing by providing information assessed from your Akashic records pertaining to your recent life, past lives, your soul lessons and higher soul potential. Twilight. The energy that twilight creates is a slight change in frequency from the spiritual plane you will find yourself immediately in after your death. Twilight provides a supporting environment for you to ponder and heal your regrets, guilt, shame, grief, loss, and shock about your recent life. Everything looks remarkably different through the lens of twilight, as it provides a bigger picture view of the life you just lived. However, it will be challenging to face some of the choices you made during that life, and it will be entirely up to you if you feel able to accept responsibility for those choices. If many of the choices you made were fear-based, you will realise that your fears armoured you against receiving and giving love and kindness and compassion. And naturally you will wonder why. Once you investigate, the reasons will become obvious. You will let go and the armouring will break down, helping you to be less guarded about the unconditionally loving environment of twilight. Twilight also enables you to physically contact your loved ones and attend your own funeral, only if you deem this to be important for your healing. Usually most accept this offering as it does help with grief and letting go of any regrets. Attending your own funeral also fulfills your curiosity. Let's face it, we probably all want to know what people really thought of us. As twilight creates an energy system that perpetuates self-love, it is the perfect place for you to find forgiveness for self and others. It also encourages you to accept that your recent life has ended and you will not be able to return to it. If there is regret and self-judgment at the time of your death, it can often create a feeling of urgency to reincarnate relatively quickly. Rather than dwell on those feelings and deepen your fears and confusion, it is best to pause and breathe, as those feelings are temporary and will pass. Taking time to breathe will help you to surrender what is happening in the present moment, which allows you to be more receptive to the healing that is available. All souls require time in twilight. It provides the perfect healing environment for your recent emotional and physical pain to be transformed before moving on to the next stage of transition. How you adjust to your recent death and your ability to let go determines how long you will remain in twilight. Experiencing sudden death, feeling unresolved before you died, and having little or no faith in an afterlife may require you to spend more time in the twilight stage. Some souls remain in this energy space for a very long time, and others will leave relatively quickly, choosing reincarnation over further transitioning. Just about the breathing, what he talks about, there is actually a whole chapter on what your energy body looks like after death. And so the idea of breathing is explained much more in that there is still a sense of breath and breathing, even though we don't have lungs. We have kind of energy lungs, if you like, that allow the flow of energy to keep moving through your soul and your soul body, which is the aura that surrounds your soul. Okay, but that is in another chapter. Any questions about all this, or do you want me to continue? Continue? Okay. The seduction to return to make amends and fix things that feel broken at a core level is very hard to resist. And the fear of damnation in the afterlife is also very real for many, often forcing their hand to return to physicality with little rest in between lives. I do appreciate how it feels to be trapped in a cycle of what you believe is true. It is hard not to be stubborn or convinced that what you fear will certainly happen. Ironically, humanity is the only domain where the concept of judgment is explored, as is the power gained from being judgmental. Although I wasn't going to talk about the politics of religion, it would be neglectful of me not to mention that religion through the ages has participated in encoding the fear of judgment about the afterlife in the human psyche. Each one of us has participated in creating those religious beliefs either in our present life or past lives. At this present time of changing consciousness, these outmoded beliefs and values need to be transmuted. Unconditional love and compassion are the principal values held in the heart of the divine. Trusting in this as a universal truth will assist you to live in community whilst in body or when in spirit. As you have free will, you can take as much time as you require adjusting and letting go in twilight. There is no urgency to return to physical life, even though you may feel there is. And besides, there are plenty of souls taking up physical life at present. The timing of your next incarnation is also your choice. However, by relaxing into this new environment, it will allow your soul to rest and appreciate the learning gained from your recent life. Having that information will hold you in good stead when choosing your next incarnation. I sincerely hope that once you are in twilight, you will let go of your fears and relax. If you can trust in the process, you will be more receptive to identifying what makes you unique as a soul being. This quest will add to the quality of the journey ahead and give you more time for renewal between lives. Whatever you choose has a purpose, which you may not fully understand at the time, but in time the purpose will reveal itself to you. Your gatekeepers and your spiritual parents will be there to guide you at this significant juncture and will support you in whatever direction you decide to journey. Nearly finished. I think this is important to read. It's not a lot more to read, but this is also, I feel, really important. It's the significance of nature support. I would compare being in twilight to how it feels when you're at one with nature. The veils between life and death are thin, and the doorways to experience nature's vast systems of energies are always open. I personally felt a reassuring sense of freedom whilst in twilight, as it was not unlike how I felt when either in the ocean or at the beach, sinking into the sounds of waves crashing at the shoreline, the water washing over me, the sun heating my skin, and the pleasure of being barefoot with sand beneath my feet. I realised that not everyone has the opportunity during his or her life to be at one with nature. However, you can imagine how soothing the sounds of nature are and the comfort you will derive from letting yourself sink into the experience. Living in community requires a reciprocal arrangement for it to work well, and this principle also applies to your relationship with nature, with the Mother Earth. It is not just about what you can get from her, but also what it is you can give back. I'm not attempting to deal with how to save the physical environment of your planet as such, however, becoming more aware of how nature supports the planet and all humanity may encourage you to want to protect what is left of her. I live in community with other souls, and from this vantage point it is easier for us to be unconditional in how we express our love and share our experiences. However, it is the desire of angelic beings that humanity should also learn about the act of giving unconditionally while in physical life. Firstly, being one of your life purposes, and that it requires practice and courage to face the inevitable challenges whilst learning to master that virtue. Mother Earth offers many gifts, some of which are subtler than others. Her energy, being of a high vibration, provides a sanctuary for healing, grounding and self-awareness. Just by being amidst her vast energy systems, it can help you to explore the concept of being present, and through presence comes connection. When dying and preparing to leave your body, you can call upon Earth Nature's support, as it will soften the impact of shock as you die. Her energies can help to ease your soul out of your body once you have died. Okay, so.
I just asked the wording, how did that wording come to you? I mean, did you actually sit and type it as it was coming through to you?
I did.
So you didn't have to think, how should I put this? It was
I didn't.
Just word for word.
Yeah, I mean, it's been edited as well. You know, like what happens when you channel sort of writing? Well, for me, I don't know how it is for everybody else. I just know that there's a block of information there. I kind of get a kind of fuzzy feeling in my head, and I can feel a presence. I mean, in this case, it was obviously more deeply personal, because he could say, I'm around, it's time to do some writing. Or I would say when I was going to write, and then he would show up, you know, because I have to work within my schedule. It's not just all about what Spirit wants all the time, do you know what I mean? So I'd get this sense of a block of information, and then sometimes I either see the words, which might be the start of a sentence, or I just hear the words and then I just type it.
Were you typing stuff and thinking, I don't even know what I'm typing here?
Oh, on many occasions. You know, some stuff I obviously did know, because, you know, the first part of it is sort of his journey up to death, and then I have a small section where I've written about my story with it. But in the other stuff, no, because, you know, when I've worked as a healer for communicating with people from the afterlife, they haven't told me everything that's going on. It's more that they either need a bit of support, or they want me to pass on a message to someone else. I haven't made kind of full inquiry about, well, what are you experiencing today and what do you think is going to happen the next day, kind of thing. So yeah, so I either see the words initially, or I hear the words and then I just start typing. But because it comes out sometimes a bit too rapidly, I can't always keep up with it. But it was very interesting, and that happens more when I'm just channeling generally. But it was a very interesting experience with this, with my husband Graham, his name. Sorry, I forgot to mention his name. That's terrible, isn't it? And it's just, with that experience with him though, he throughout his life was a very subdued and fairly quiet man, as opposed to me, who's noisy and loud. And so every word seemed a lot more deliberate, and like it was well pondered. So in some ways it wasn't always flooding out, and sometimes there was great pause actually between sentences or between paragraphs, as if there was, you know, something to be pondered, so that when it was written it was more deliberate. The person that edited this book actually didn't take long to edit it. She did say it came out really quite well written, which was a stroke of genius. Maybe it's because I knew him so well, or maybe because it was a little bit more easier coming or something, I don't know. But so I was lucky with that, because a lot of channeled information has to be worked on a lot, you know, kind of put it into a way that people can actually, you know, dying's a big event. You know, the spiritual beings don't consider it a nothing. Oh, well, another person's dropped off the planet, well, that's okay. It was overpopulated anyway. It doesn't feel like that to me. It feels that every life is precious, you know, and we're fair enough. We could judge people who are doing all sorts of things in human life that we disagree with, you know. But, you know, to end a war, you need to create peace. You know, that's the thing. You don't create another war, do you? Or be at peace. And so regardless of who you are and what you've done in your reality, you know, dying is a big deal, because it means a lot. It reconfigures everything, you know, for you, you know, in past life, present life, your future lives, and it reconfigures the lives of people that you have been involved with in your life as well, the loved ones you leave behind, your friends, your enemies, whatever. It reconfigures them energetically in their own way as well. Yeah, I mean, this is a little personal, but I'll share it because I think that this demonstrates it. My father died a long time ago. I was only, what, 20, how old was I? 23, so quite a while ago. I'm 59 now. And I remember, you know, my father unfortunately had a problem with alcohol, and, you know, he was a violent man and so on and so forth, and you can imagine all the stories that go along with that, but I won't go into story. But when I was coming to terms with that in my own healing journey, I had this overwhelming sense of unbelievably deep love and gratitude for him, because I felt on a soul level to actually commit to come to earth and to even abuse someone or violate them or whatever you do. It's a big call. You know, it is a big call at a soul level to set up this arrangement with someone that I was a victim and he was a, you know, victimizer. It's a big call, not just from me. It's a big call to put my hand up to experience those things. But I just felt this almost amount of, I guess, soul love for him, that he was willing to do that as a part of whatever my journey needed to be. And in that moment, I'm not saying I find forgiveness easy, because I don't, but I could actually feel such deep compassion for him as a soul being.
Because we don't know. So
Sure. Mostly before my husband passed, he mostly had, apart from present life experiences, he had a lot of past life memory come up as well. And because and you'll see, you know, in the book, it really talks about actually the soul lesson he was on. And that's very much a part of what we're all here. We're on to learn a soul lesson in a human reality. And this can take lifetimes. In his case, he very much felt that he was a victim, you know, a victim of experience. And that in that victim consciousness, I'm talking about generally, I'm not saying he lived in inappropriate ways or anything like that. He was a very honourable man and he had a lot of integrity and he was a very good person. But he believed that in his human journey as a soul being, he was here to overcome kind of victim consciousness and the experience of feeling disempowered, by being, a victim. Now, victims generally feel they have no choice, that things are chosen for them. There's no way out. They can't change things. They can feel disempowered. And once again, he didn't kind of live his life like a mopey victim, nobody loves me, everyone hates me kind of stuff. But the point is, he's talking about it in reference to many lives. Now, he also recognised in past life memory that he went through before he died that he also had been a victimiser. He had also hurt people. And we might call that a sort of karmic balancing of the scales. He didn't really see it like that. I did this and therefore then I had to do that. I don't think he saw it as that. I think he really saw it more of as a sum total of experiences and not about payback or punishing or someone because they've done something bad to you. So he saw that as a totality of many of his experiences as he journeyed human life. And he came to the realisation that this is actually what he needed to transcend. And this is the main reason for experiencing life, was to transcend this big kind of way of being that we all are to some degree as we are humans. We've all been victims, or we've all felt victimised, and we've probably hurt others. Not intentionally, or maybe intentionally, who knows, We're not all squeaky clean, but that's the human playground, isn't it? We're allowed to do kind of whatever we want. So after he died, he obviously in the various stages of transition, he was given, more snapshots, I suppose, and experiences of viewing and delving much more deeply into the collective consciousness of his human experiences. And then through that, he was also then given a choice that naturally he didn't need to reincarnate again if he didn't want to. And he opted for this other kind of way of being, which he's still existing in right now. Because essentially, apart from the victim consciousness, what the victim consciousness in my husband denied was the great healer that he was also. And he was able to channel healing energies in ways that I could never do it. You'd be knocked off your socks, it was so strong. And so, but in the end, I don't think he didn't feel he could ever do his work fully here, and he needed to experience doing that in some way, in another state or another form. So at this time, he's not choosing to reincarnate again, and he's referring to himself as an earth angel, meaning that he is helping others at their time of passing and also giving information. He may go on and give information to other people to bring forth. That'd be great, I'm happy for that. But for the moment, I had the contract with him to do this book, and I've got a contract to do a second book with him, but I'm not sure what I'll do after that. But he now presents himself as the earth angel. And so he refines and defines that as a being that is very close to Earth dimension, that is very much still connected to Earth, and humanity's feelings and ways of being. But through letting go of that and learning that soul lesson, he feels now he can guide others in helping them let go of it as well. So that's a part of the journey in the book, and it's a part of the journey in the second book, where there's a lot more other information and more in-depth information following up from this first book. So that's his transformation, but he's not declaring he's not returning, he's just not at this time. There was two things I kind of wanted to cover in this last part. I was going to, if that's okay with everybody, read another excerpt from the book, which is about the next stage after twilight, which Graham refers to as the dreaming. So I was going to read that. And then I thought what would be really nice is that obviously quite a number of you have had your own experiences, but we're not necessarily going to talk about every experience, but I think what's important when we experience these events that occur in our lives, and I do this a lot with clients or in groups, is that I like people to think about, well, what was the purpose of that? You know, what has it taught you or given to you that perhaps you wouldn't normally have been able to appreciate hadn't you had those experiences? Does that make sense? Because I think there's one thing having experienced, you know, psychic phenomena. I think it's great and it's all this and that, but we also have to make it practical and real and grounded, I think. Otherwise it doesn't carry as much meaning. You know, this is what I feel, or it doesn't get given the significance that it should be, you know, given. Because these events are extraordinary events. They happen for a reason, and I love looking at the reasons things happen. And so, you know, maybe we can talk about that a little bit if people feel willing to. Okay? Excuse me. So this is titled The Dreaming, a Place for Healing and Inquiry. The tendrils of Earth's nature energy will hold onto your spirit body as you leave twilight and move into another field of energy for further healing and inquiry. The tendrils help you feel safe and will continue to support you until you have completed your next process. They will then be released unless you choose to reincarnate, which will require Earth support once again for your re-entry into physical reality. Your spiritual guides will once again be there to assist you as you relocate energetically. There will be a change in energy as you shift from twilight to the next portal of consciousness. However, as you will be more comfortable in your spirit body by then, you will be able to surrender to the changes more fluidly. Many refer to the next portal of consciousness as the Fey realm. I, however, will call it the dreaming. I understand that many humans will already have a deep appreciation and conscious connection to this realm. My perception of it may vary from yours, however, it is not my intention to alter your imaginings, but to expand your awareness about who coexists within this vast energy system. As you have the freedom to create your own reality, if your experience when you reach this realm is one of fairies, nature divas and elementals, then that is exactly what you will experience for further transformation. The dreaming appears in stories told by ancient peoples for a very long time, and still today there is mention of this realm in the myths and legends that have survived disbelief and Christianity. The stories tell of the early peoples who lived upon the earth but also consciously communed with the goddesses in the realm of the dreaming. It was a place where they could honour and give thanks to the goddesses for protecting their earth, their families and all that they deemed of value for their health and well-being. The dreaming is primarily a place of divine feminine consciousness and of fairies, elementals and nature divas who dwell there, helping to sustain the feminine principles about life, death and rebirth. The dreaming realm supports the cycles of life by assisting all the human souls entering and leaving Earth's energy field. This realm also helps souls prepare to either reincarnate or to continue the onward journey. If you find yourself there sometime after death, it is because you have chosen to continue to transform your recent life's hurt into the potential of new life and a journey of soul learning. The dreaming realm radiates the healing powers and wisdom of the feminine, which allows you to resolve the shadowy influences of your wounded masculine and your wounded feminine from your most recent life. The wounding of both these aspects is not a story that only pertains to your recent life. It is in fact an old one, which you carry from lifetime to lifetime. Your overall experiences and expression of your wounded masculine and wounded feminine in human life shapes the progress your soul is making as it tries to complete a cycle of learning prior to rebirth or spiritual renewal. Your healing is aided by your gatekeepers, who provide you with past life information that helps you to see the bigger picture about the journey both these aspects have travelled. The gatekeepers provide a collection of stories for you to use as a reference point for healing and for when you choose the next phase of your soul journey. The information provided will also help you to accept if a particular soul lesson is complete or that there is more work to be done for its completion. You will also be shown future potentials that will help when choosing to reincarnate from the dreaming portal or continue onwards to the next realm of consciousness. The dreaming is a soothing place to dwell in. It is deeply nourishing and restful. Sounds nice, doesn't it? It is also empowering and expansive as your awareness of the infinite nature of the divine develops. There is no pressure to leave until you are ready. Time as you know it does not exist, and hundreds of years can pass on earth before you may choose to journey onward or reincarnate. While in the dreaming realm, you will also feel a deeper level of freedom to express your will and to expand your wings in joyous anticipation of what lies ahead. If you choose to hang out for a while in the dreaming, your soul essence will contribute to the community by helping to sustain the integrity of the divine feminine during your stay. I personally had some very interesting experiences to help heal the wounding of my feminine and masculine counterparts. I had been drawn to healing the pain associated with those aspects before I died, and at the time it was both illuminating and very freeing. I realised when I was in the dreaming that the healing I had experienced prior to death was a preparatory exercise for what would be required of me in this realm. I learnt that it is ultimately the spiritual ambition of all souls, all human souls, to heal the disconnection between male and female and the potential destructive natures of both. It is a journey that each one of us has in common. Personally, I found another level of what I needed to let go of if I was to reincarnate or pursue further transitioning. I could see clearly that I still believed that to survive as a man, I would have to either be a victim of or a victimizer to other men. To support their belief, I would continue to control my inner feminine from ascending out of the darkness for healing and expression. I continued to purge my soul of past life pain. I was shown a number of lifetimes where I had been a soldier of war. On some of those occasions, I absolutely believed in the necessity of war and felt empowered and enriched by the experience. However, on other occasions, I was demented by the long-term consequences of war. I was left feeling helpless to change the destruction that had been wrought, living in guilt, shame and sorrow for what I had done to others. I was also shown when I had been a pacifist and led a number of spiritual lives as a man, isolated from war and the general destructive nature of humanity. Although I had known great peace, I had also lived in ignorance and denial about what was going on at the periphery of my reality, refusing to use my spiritual knowledge to help or heal or aid the impoverished. I distanced myself through spiritual arrogance and disdain. I also saw other lives I had led as females. My feminine had also felt the ravages of war, losing her family, her home, and being traumatized beyond recognition. She had suffered persecution at the hands of angry men and women who felt threatened by her beliefs and the potential influence she was having upon others. One past feminine self had abused her power as a woman, being vitriolic and damaging to her children. Another, a spiritual midwife, had abused her power by withholding spiritual information for fear of being usurped by others she judged as less deserving. I examined other lives and they too had a similar theme and outcome. In the dreaming, as I examined my many other lives, I knew in each moment of realization I could no longer support a way of being. It no longer served either my masculine or my feminine, and although I was not ashamed of my ignorance, I could no longer serve such outmoded ways of living as a human being, nor would I be willing in the future to enable others to behave as either victims or victimisers. I know that this is an issue for all humanity, although the circumstances under which you find yourself from lifetime to lifetime may appear different than mine. It is not the time to lose hope in the potential to change the plight of humanity. Change is afoot, and each of you, whether consciously or not, is a part of those changes. Almost finished. It's very difficult, isn't it, turning this over? Resting in the dreaming. The process you undergo to reach this stage of transitioning requires focus, commitment and courage, and is therefore tiring. And so once I had finished examining my Akashic records and accepted with joy that I had completed a soul cycle of learning, I took the time for some very deep rest. Resting would also calibrate the new information and healing energies I had received thus far, and prepare me for my interview with my spirit council to determine what my soul's new trajectory would be. At this stage, it had been about 6 months since I, as Graham, had died. As I reflect, I realise how much change occurred in a very short amount of time. I welcomed the rest and felt in no hurry to push forward. I was able to surrender into the stillness with complete trust that any decisions I would make in the next phase would be for my highest good and for the highest good of my heavenly and earthly families. I also noticed how different my soul body felt energetically from when I first began my journey in the afterlife. At first, you are more invested in learning to surrender and let go of your recent physical life rather than concentrating too much on all the various energy shifts that are happening. As I have mentioned, your spiritual parents and gatekeepers are supporting your spiritual body through every experience of consciousness, which allows you to focus on the job at hand rather than the science of your soul's transformation from an energy viewpoint. Now, at this juncture, I had the time to observe how expanded my energy systems felt. The vibration of energy moving through my radiant heart was pulsing at a much faster rate. I also realised how familiar the consciousness of the dreaming was to me. I recognised I had been there on many other occasions after physical death and had also experienced it as the portal for launching a new life. I felt stronger and more independent, as if the shape and texture of my spirit body was clearer and my soul identity more defined. And following on from that, I've had quite a number of women that have, been supposedly infertile that might have come to me. They've tried all these resources and then finally they want to know, well, actually, am I meant to have a baby? And sadly, sometimes you have to say, no, I'm sorry. Then, there isn't a soul being there, but maybe you can get a baby in another way, adoption or whatever, or surrogate, using a surrogate or what have you. But most of the time, those women, I think, have been prompted by something else. I think somewhere they've already had an intuitive knowing that maybe a soul is there waiting to come in, but maybe they need other things to adjust within their own system to be able to fall pregnant, and to bring that soul into being. But often they need a nudge, like you were saying, from the soul. Hey, Mum, I'm waiting, get into action here. And it's maybe not that you weren't trying, but it was more, I guess, that sort of opening yourself up. Yes, I had a client recently who had been through 8 IVF processes. I've never been through that process, but if you've ever witnessed a person or you've been through it yourself, it's really, really traumatic. And you put yourself at risk, you're taking terrible kind of drugs, hormones, and you put yourself at risk of getting cancer and so on and so forth. She'd had 8 and then she came to me and she said, you told me I was going to have a baby and I still haven't had one, And I said, look, I know, I can't even imagine what it must feel like to be in your situation, but I think you should give it one more go. It just felt, I know, because I think for her it was the journey as well, even though it was an extraordinary thing to go through, 8 processes. Anyway, her baby's due in July. Yay for her! And she's having a little boy, so it's beautiful. Yeah, really.
Appreciate it.
It's not always talking about those bigger choices. Okay, the big choice is I've chosen to be human. The next thing is I've suddenly realised I'm in this situation that really sucks and it's awful. But that's the way everyone lives their life around me. That's the way my parents live their lives. This is what I've been taught taught to live my life, and this is what I witness. But still, I feel rubbish, or I feel unhappy. I don't know what to do about it. And so yes, you can't just say, well, you chose it, because that's just flippant and it's a lack of regard for that person's life. Because regardless of how anyone's experiencing life, it's how they're experiencing it. And we don't want to add to the pain and suffering of that. So my approach is to help people identify what it is that they would like to change. Because I think we forget that just because we made a choice to come here, and we might be choosing certain experiences with our parents, our siblings, even people that we're meant to love, we can also change those choices. It's not set in stone, but it becomes a big conflict because we often have come to a place where accepting that this is all there is. This is all that's ever going to happen. Nothing else can possibly change, because we get bogged down in that kind of apathy and a bit of depression, and there's not a lot of external things that are actually giving us hope. So I can feel the despair in people, but what I remind them time and time again is they still have choice and they can change things now. Now admittedly, it's not like, oh, suddenly I want to create, winning the lotto, and I'm going to live in a palatial mansion and I'm going to be surrounded by 1 million people that love me and adore me. It's not that exaggerated. It's very practical. It needs to be done in a grounded way, and it needs to be done in a way that we can actually consciously grow into this new way that we want to be, and to learn to understand the preciousness of actually being able to have and new choices, and how to create those new choices. And it takes time. I always advise people to be patient with themselves, because it's hard to accept that there can be a completely new way to exist when we've lived a certain way, maybe for 50 years, or 60 years, or even 20 years. So it's all about helping them to genuinely accept and recognise they can make new choices, and they actually, no matter what your circumstances are, you can change your reality given time, patience and faith, having faith. Just recently actually worked with a number of souls that have suicided, and I don't really honestly believe they suddenly have to come back because they've suicided. I think that's not the truth of it, and they are given the same opportunities as any soul is once they've died, as if you died of natural causes, or you died in a car accident, or someone took your life. They are given, there's no judgment. It's just that's how they died. It's like people dying of cancer. They died of cancer, So I don't believe, and in my experience with communicating with souls that have suicided, it's not necessary that they're suddenly going to come back just because they've suicided. Well, in my early days of channeling, I used to channel all sorts of weird and wonderful characters, I can tell you. And then it sort of settled down and changed, I suppose. I think I'll start at the beginning, and I was talking to that lady over there and her husband. Look, I first started communicating with beings when I was about 9 years of age. And what I recognised, they were beings from the Pleiades, which is the star system. And I communicated with them in a completely other language, which I thought I was only speaking of in my head, but I evidently used to speak it out loud because my 2 sisters thought I was actually crazy. And maybe I was. And and I only used to experience them as like columns of sort of light. And there were many, it was like the faces of these were just kind of looking upon me. And I wasn't freaked out, which is surprising. And I don't even think I had an incredible imagination as a child. But I know to this day that they certainly saved my life in many ways, because they gave me hope and support that there was something beyond what I was experiencing. And then when I first started to channel, which awakened, because sometimes these things get on hold until you get activated again, like I was talking to the lady in the back. You know, we have this psychic phenomena that goes on, but for whatever reason it can get stifled or repressed or squished down. And my psychicness opened up the first night I met my husband. You know, I said, oh, that's the man I'm going to marry and spend the rest of my life with. But when I first started to really, then that started to activate, and then I started to work. The first beings that I channeled were Pleiadian energies. At that time, they were much more talking about sort of, you know, the human global consciousness, and I guess not the despair, but more about that, you know, change had to happen, and more about that on a much more global level rather than a personal level. And I used to channel those, you know, regularly on a once a Friday evening, you know, every month or something, and get a big audience for that. But my work changed because I just wanted to help people much more on an individual level, I think, you know, rather than talking about really esoteric stuff all the time. Because the esoteric stuff is great, the Pleiadians are a wealth of information, but I felt we needed much more practical, do you know what I mean? When I first started to actually channel them in a public place, this is in Perth, it's really tricky because they used to still speak in the language, and then I had to actually interpret it, and then I had to speak it in English. So it was quite a vibrational kind of download, if you like, you know, an adjustment. Now, if I just started to channel the language, I would have been fine. I would have had a complete new idea, you know, idea what they were talking about energetically, because it would have resonated with me on a vibrational level. But nobody else probably would have been able to understand it. So, you know, and they might have thought I was a bit crazy. But I consider still the Pleiadians, you know, my star. You know, if I'm star-seeded from somewhere, I would claim the Pleiades as where I've been star-seeded from. And yes, so my third book is The Alien in Me. It's a good title, isn't it? And the second book is The Angel in Me. No, The Angel in You, not in me. The Angel in You, A Guide to Living a Soulful Life. I don't have a personal belief in hell, no matter what we've done. I believe we all, you know, are children of the divine, and we will return to the divine in love and compassion. And yes, I think we're given opportunity just to understand what we've done, or what we've, you know, have done during our lives, but not as a punishment, but just as to become more conscious, you know, and to choose different things in future lifetimes. Yes, and I think there's a fine line between that. I think there's a fine line between saying we accept that they're on a mission like we all are, but we also don't want to encourage it. You know, we don't want to encourage war on anyone. And, you know, the terrorists aren't always the people that live in other country. The terrorists can be the ones that live in your own family, that terrorise, you know,
Your own demons.
your own, well, internally, but it could be, you know, the person you know. It could be your father, your mother, it could be one of your brothers or sisters. There's a terrorist in all of us, if you like, you know. Sorry? The Prime Minister. You know, so I think, yes, that's awful, you know, suicide, but they go and kill people en masse. I understand that, or whatever else is going on. But we are also sending soldiers over to kill. You know, we're not innocent here. We're supporting that as a whole way of being. So there's that fine line between accepting that the world is experiencing shadow and light, and it is for us to constantly seek the light and put the shadow to rest. But I think we don't want to encourage, you know, it becoming larger than life and, you know, becoming most of what people experience it. We want less people to have to experience that. All people in the end. You know, so it's about discouraging behaviour that defiles, I suppose, the essence of the human spirit. Look, I'm not standing here in defence of the Pleiadian. You know, my experience of it is the light, and yes, there is talk about the reptilian energy of it, but the reptilian energy of the Pleiadian energies are incarnate in human form. They're not necessarily discarnate. And they will be perhaps operated through that reptilian mind, which is
people like Hitler, like she was talking about,
potentially, yeah,
been brainwashed by reptilians.
sure, But there's plenty of reptilian energy in humanity. That's the truth of it. And that could be residual Pleiadian energy that has incarnated into human form. But I think the Pleiadian in the light don't necessarily operate. I think that whatever happens, it's best not to ever try to be afraid of anything. Do you know what I mean? And I think you're less likely to experience things as bad or good or what have you. Even if a spirit or soul comes to you and you're not sure what it is, the first reaction, try not to be afraid. It's not necessarily, do you know what I mean? Obviously you can say a prayer, either to remove yourself from the premises, I don't kind of want to hang out with you or talk to you, or go to the light or what have you, but I think the first thing is never be afraid, don't be afraid. And I remember visiting a friend, and she's profoundly psychically open. She has been since a small child, but because of the nature of her psychicness, she also unfortunately suffers from a mental illness. It has sent her a little bit crazy. But that's, she's okay. She lives with that and she has a good and balanced life. But she talks to so many beings. I remember going to her place just recently when I was in Perth. I was going, oh my God, there is no room to sit here. Seriously, every bit of space was occupied because she's so open and she's in communication with so many. I couldn't stand it, really. And so I had to ask some to leave just to make a bit of space, because energetically, truly, you just couldn't fit in. And as soon as I sort of opened the door, it was like, whoa, so it's kind of funny, isn't it? But yeah, I told a few to nick off, really. I'd come for a cup of tea. So... So this is the conclusion of kind of the book. Okay, so I'll read a little bit of that. And I think that's a nice rounding up, if that's okay. You found that over there? So this is kind of no longer Graham, my husband. This is him in his transformation as Earth Angel. And it's Earth Angel's conclusion. And I won't perhaps read all of it. I'll go to, I read a little bit of it just to round today up. And this is a part of, what kind of we've been talking about to a degree. And anyway, just see how you go. The journey of the human soul is to find your unique way to be an expression of divine love. The journey is filled with an infinite number of possibilities and potential in how to master this. It is not about serving the ego or boosting the ego of others. It is simple and tender, vulnerable and loving, devoid of any need for drama and conflict. It would be remiss of me not to inform you about the folly of having too big a plan, or about being too controlling in how you believe you will achieve self-actualization. I'm not preparing you for failure, but more that in your hurry to achieve self-awareness, many forget to stay in the moment and simply be kind to self and others. Any small act of kindness may help someone from falling into the darkness of depression, or bring a renewal of faith when faith has been lost. If you believe that the bigger your vision, the more successful your life will be, then you might be disappointed and it may lead to sabotage and feelings of failure. Keep it simple, as simplicity is manageable. If you can sustain simplicity of being kind in each day you live, and then you can extend your kindness to include more people and create other ways to show kindness. Being kind in every day will reward you with feelings of contentment and comfort during your life and offer you great support when you are at the end of your life. Humility is also a key component to manifesting your soul path. Humility is an elevated expression of human consciousness. If your heart can open to it as an energy rather than an emotion, it has the capacity to nurture your heart and inspire you to find ways to create personal and global change. You may ask, how do I allow humility to be expression of my consciousness? It is simple. Firstly, be kind to self by making the choice to let go of the burdens of selfishness. To do that, you would need to believe in the intrinsic value of healing your emotional, spiritual and religious wounding, and by taking responsibility for any dysfunctional behaviour that you may have adopted as a result of that wounding. As you know from reading this material, it is definitely never too late to make new choices and change your reality, even in the last stages of your life. What you do in your life will influence what you perceive you have achieved once you were profiling your recent experiences during your transition in the afterlife. Being kind and having humility will be of significant value to the overall cycle of your learning that your human soul is undergoing. The soul requires many lifetimes to actualize, I skipped a little bit, the soul requires many lifetimes to actualize its human potential, and although you may feel defeated in one life, there will be other opportunities for you to rejoin your soul path and actively create life from a conscious perspective. A soul, once it has reached a particular phase of transition after physical death, has a clear vision of its spiritual intent prior to taking up earthly life once again. As you know, there are a multitude of reasons why this original vision is then distorted and the direction becomes skewed during the next lifetime. Those that reincarnate very shortly after death can be prompted by unresolved pain from the life that has recently ended. The broader spiritual union is in many ways unclear for them, but from a universal perspective, there's always meaning and purpose for wanting to make amends regardless of when you choose to do so. Each experience adds value to the cycle of learning your soul is journeying. However, don't lose hope. Each time you rebirth, whether metaphoric or by physically incarnating, it does give rise to new hope that your soul path and the path of humanity as a whole will be actualized. Over time, as each soul moves towards its human potential, your innate wisdom will guide you in how to create a sustainable earth and a harmonious existence for all who dwell upon her. If you ever feel you have lost direction, I encourage you to source the ways and means available to help you rediscover your true path. For me, it took an illness to jolt me out of illusion and find my way back to the reality of love and to heal those haunting feelings I had from childhood of being separate from divine love. And I'll end it there. Okay. So everyone, thank you very, very, very much for coming. I've had a really wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Cheryl, for inviting me along. Yeah, I've really had a great time. Yeah. Do you want to give everyone a notice about the next event?
I do.
Cool.
You're organising me, thank you.
I'm getting bossy.